Graphing parabolas. When graphing parabolas, there are several things we need to find. The first thing is we need to identify standard form equation. Then identify the vertex from standard form equation. Find P, which is part of that standard form equation. Then identify the focus point and identify the directrix line. And then finally, we want to identify the axis of symmetry. Once you have done all that, then you can do the final step, which is the actual graphing of all of these different aspects. And then that'll tell you exactly where to draw the parabola. In this first example, we have already found our standard form equation, and that is y squared equals 10x. So that would mean that my vertex is 0, 0. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and graph the point 0, 0. And then my focus point, well, the next thing I really need to do is to find my P. So P is going to, or 4P rather, is going to equal 10, whatever is before the non-squared term. So I'm going to divide by 4. So P equals 10 over 4, which is 5 halves. Okay, so if that equals 5 halves, then I should be able to find my focus and my directrix. My focus is going to equal, since my y is the squared term, that means my y is going to stay constant, and then my focus is going to be my h plus my p. So that's going to make my focus point 5 halves, 0. So I'm going to graph that point. So that's about right there. And that's my focus. And here's my vertex. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is to graph my directrix. Well, my focus is in 5 halves here, and that's my P distance. So my directrix is going to be out 5 halves. And this is going to be my P distance as well. So the directrix is going to be x equals my h minus my p. So that's negative 5 halves. And then I'm going to just draw a dashed line for that. Okay, so once I have those things, then I just need my axis of symmetry. My axis of symmetry goes through the vertex and through the focus. So what is the thing that goes through the vertex and the focus? That would be the 0 right there. It's the same. So it's this line y equals 0. So I'm going to just draw a dashed line right there. And that's my axis of symmetry. Okay, so once I have these things drawn, then I can pretty easily draw my actual equation. My actual equation is, or my actual graph, is going to be the vertex, and it's going to curve around my focus. So it's going to look something like that. In this next one, we are given x plus 1 quantity squared equals negative 2 y minus 1. So the first thing we can easily do is identify our vertex. So that would be my hk, which is negative 1, positive 1. Okay, since my x is squared, I know it's a vertical parabola up and down. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the point negative 1, 1. And that is my vertex. And I know it's going to be some form of up and down equation. That's my vertex right there. Okay, now my focus. To find my focus, I need to know my P. So I'm going to find 4P equals negative 2, because whatever is before the non-squared term is my 4P. Divide by 4, and P equals negative 1 half. If P equals negative 1 half, then my focus is going to be, well, my x needs to be the same. So it's going to be negative 1, because it's up and down, my x is the same. 1 plus my negative 1 half. Okay, so then when I actually figure that out, 1 minus 1/2 is 1/2. So my focus is -1, 1/2. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that point, -1 and +1/2. So it's actually like right there. And that's my focus. So that means my graph is going to curve down. That's what that means. Okay, now the next thing is my directrix. My directrix also has to do with the P, but it is a line, and it's a line that doesn't touch the graph. So it's going to go away from the graph, P amount. So we're going to take our Y equals our K term, which is 1, minus our P, which was -1/2. So if I were to write that in simplified form, Y equals 1 minus -1/2 is +3/2. So that's my line. So +3/2 would be the line right here, which is 1.5. So I'm going to draw a line right there, and that is my directrix. Alright, and the last thing we need to find is my axis of symmetry. Well, it's that line that cuts the parabola in half or goes through the vertex and the focus. So it's that line right there, and then we look at what is that line. It is the line at y equals -1. Oh, sorry, x equals -1, not y. X equals -1. So those are all the things that you find, and then once you graph them, all you have to do is graph the final equation, which curves around the focus going through the vertex. So there you go, final answer. In this last example, we have the equation y squared equals 4 times the quantity x minus 1. So my vertex is 1, 0. The next thing I need to do is find my p. So that's going to be the number before the non-squared term, which is 4. 4p equals 4. So if you divide by 4, p equals 1. Well, that's going to mean that my focus is going to be, well, if my vertex is 1, 0, and I know it's a sideways graph, then the thing that's not going to change is my y. So, comma 0 is going to stay the same in the focus. But then we take 1, which is my h, plus 1, which is my p, to 0. So that's my focus. And next, my directrix. My directrix also has to do with the p, but instead of adding the p, you're going to subtract the p. So it's going to be my x, which is the changing term, equals my h minus my p, which is 0. So my directrix is x equals 0. And finally, my axis of symmetry. My axis of symmetry is going to be, instead of x equals, it's going to be y equals, and it's going to be whatever is the same in the vertex and the focus, which is 0. So there you go. Now I just graph all of these things. So my axis, first, my vertex is the point 1, 0. So I'll graph the vertex. Next, I'll graph my focus point, which is at 2, 0. Right there. Next, I'll graph my directrix. My directrix is x equals 0. So x equals 0 is right here. So it's that vertical line. All right, and finally, my axis of symmetry is going to cut the graph in half and go through my vertex and my focus point. All right, so the last thing we do is actually graphing the real graph, which is going to curve around the focus and away from the directrix. So that would be your final graph. That's it for your notes on graphing parabolas. Go through the practice problems. Make sure you actually know how to do these because you will be asked to do all these parts and graph it on your quiz. So make sure you actually do a few extra problems just to make sure you know what's going on. And then go ahead and take your quiz.